Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maura Keefe. I'm one of the scholars in residence. Welcome to the first Pillow Talk of the season, and what a delight it is to be here.
The first one.
Of course
That's
it is,
great.
right? These talks happen Saturdays and occasionally on Sundays this summer. Coming next week, this is the commercial for next week. Coming next week on Saturday, a documentary film screening about the Dutch choreographer Hans van Manen, whose work we'll be seeing with Dutch National Ballet when they make their Pillow debut next week. And on Sunday, we'll be in conversation with the three curators of Welcoming the World, the exhibition Inside the Barn. The best place to find out about all of the performances, events, talks, etc., is on the Pillow website or in the festival brochure, which you can pick up in the reading room or at the box office. Now on to today. The title of today's talk is Partnering with Mark Morris. And before I introduce these folks, a little bit of a setup. Partnering, obviously, critical in dance. And over the years, you've witnessed some fabulous partnerships with Mark Morris. Dance partners like Guillermo Resto, Aeneas to Mark Stido, musicians such as cellist Yo-Yo Ma, music directors such as Colin Fowler, artistic partners in White Oak Dance Ensemble with Mikhail Baryshnikov, design partners like Isaac Mizrahi, Nicole Pierce, and Michael Habowski. What you've also witnessed, but perhaps not realized, is one of the most enduring partnerships in the history of Mark Morris Dance Group, and that is the partnership between Mark Morris as artistic director and executive director Nancy Umanoff. They both have ridiculously impressive bios, so I'm going to be very brief so we hear from them and rather than me reading this. But just to start, Nancy became the managing director of Mark Morris Dance Group in 1986 and has served as its president and executive director since 2000. Under her leadership, the dance group launched the world-renowned Dance for PD program, Parkinson's disease program, and built the Mark Morris Dance Center in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. She has lectured extensively and been honored frequently for her brilliance as a leader in the arts. Mark Morris, dancer, artistic director, conductor, music director, leader of the Dance Center in Brooklyn, author of this fabulous book, Out Loud, called by the New York Times the most successful and influential choreographer alive and indisputably the most musical. Morris and the Mark Morris Dance Group have had an indelible impact on the dance world at large and on Jacob's Pillow specifically. Thanks for being here and joining this conversation.
That's about it. And do you have any questions? Yeah, okay.
We're certainly going to get to the present, and we'll talk about Look of Love. I know lots of you were just in there. But I wanted to actually just obviously start in the beginning. And Mark, you write in Out Loud about meeting Nancy. And thanks for prepping me with this book. It made my research for this talk so much easier. So thanks for writing it.
That's why it's there. Yeah, absolutely.
So you talk about meeting Nancy, and she was working at Pentacle at the time. Could you say how you knew you needed somebody to take on the responsibilities that you had been doing sort of yourself and with friends, and that you knew you needed somebody to be a full-time arts administrator for you?
That was very easy to do. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no idea. I don't have much book learning. So I applied. I was living in Hoboken at the time, whatever that was. I don't know, 1980, something like that. I don't even know the chronology. I can tell you that I was living in Hoboken, so I could apply as a choreographer because I lived in New Jersey for a New Jersey State Council on the Arts grant. So I applied for one to put on a show, and I got it. And it wasn't giant, but it was also 1980, so it was giant. And we did a couple of shows, right? You were like, you're gonna do that. Just ask. Yeah, okay, I'll do this. So, my friend and colleague at the time, Barry Alterman, was great at helping the sort of entrepreneurial aspect, meaning theater, publicity, that kind of stuff. Photography, I didn't know anything, and I still don't know much, so I get to work with fabulous people who are expert at all the shit that I have no clue how to do, which is, I know how to choreograph. Ellipsis. So anyway, we were having been spotted at Dance Theater Workshop in the early days, that we did like, I don't know, a couple of shows, and we were spotted by Harvey Lichtenstein and his agents to appear at the Next Wave Festival early on at Brooklyn Academy of Music. And so there was something about a check, Nancy can tell you this, and it was like, what do we do with this? And so it was suggested that we seek out someone with expertise, and that was the umbrella dance promotion joint called Pentacle, and it still exists, and Nancy was their go.
And so Mark came to Pentacle, well, not Mark himself, but came to Pentacle because BAM was going to write him a check for $10,000, and they said, who do we write the check to? And he said, me.
Cash.
And they said, and they said, well, you'll lose all of it in taxes, so you need to go to talk to Pentacle because they can help you. And Mark became part of what was the Foundation for Independent Artists, which was a corporate umbrella that I ran. I had 8 companies, and I did their finances and their grant writing, and that's how I first met Mark.
So Nancy, I've been thinking a lot about that. 8 companies working in an umbrella, serving the field in that way. What made you know, like, okay, I'm going to give up the other 7 and go with this guy?
Is that what I did? You know, yeah, well, you want me to tell the sunglass story? Okay, so the first time I actually met Mark in person, I had already seen the work and really had fallen in love with it. But Mark came into the office because I was writing a grant and I needed to know what the project was that he wanted me to try to raise money for. And I was young, I was nervous, very nervous. We were in a small conference room with no windows, I remember, because there was really nothing for me to look at, except Mark sitting across the table from me wearing mirrored aviator glasses. And all I could see was myself sweating. And I couldn't even think what to ask because I was just watching the sweat like in the mirror drip down. And so I finally, I took a deep breath and I said, can you take those glasses off? And he said, sure. And he did.
And then the rest is history.
And the rest is history. You know, it was those eyes.
You know how to whistle, don't you? Yeah.
So, Nancy, a little backstory, though. You were a dance major at SUNY Brockport, and Garth Fagan, choreographer of The Lion King and artistic director of his own company that's performed here at the Pillow, and longtime Brockport faculty member, told me one time here when he was at the Pillow, what a brilliant choreographer you were. And I've been thinking about the shift from being an artist yourself into being an arts administrator. And if you knew when you left college, like, that's it, I don't want to be on stage anymore, I don't want to make dances, I want to do something else. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The one thing, I did a little bit of choreography. I did a little bit of lighting design too. That was a little bit more fun, actually. And I danced. And I thought you were going to tell the story about Garth offering me a job in the company and me being the only fool to turn it down.
I did not know that story. Thank you for saying that.
Okay, well, I think I knew somewhere in my senior year what I wanted to do, which was, I didn't know what it was called, but I was doing a little bit of all these things, booking the student company at shopping malls up in Rochester and doing some writing, doing some lighting design, a bunch of work. And I asked somebody, it's like, this is what I want to do. And they're like, yeah, that's arts administration. I'm like, oh. And so I applied for grad school and very clearly knew that that's what I wanted to do. I couldn't actually be a dancer because I can't be a tool for somebody else. I admire that ability in dancers to give up everything they have, their soul, their artistry, for someone else's vision. Not something I thought I could ever do.
Do you have another question? Am I on? Am I on? Yes. Okay. I mean the mic.
When I was going to say, when are you not on? So, do you think, Mark, that
lighting designers? I always. Come on.
I've only done work for Liz Strab and Robin Hertline. Sorry.
Okay.
In 1970.
do you think that background in dance is helpful? For
her or for me?
For you, I'm pretty confident.
For everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody start dance.
Uh-huh.
Nobody told you to stop dancing. Oh, okay, that's good. That was good. All right. 5, 6, 7, 8, or I don't know. Okay.
I guess I'm thinking about some of the a story, Nancy, that you told me once about getting dancers' tracks back organized to the original L'Allegro, and that you were in conversation with that, and that feels like not something that an arts administrator would be necessarily involved in if they didn't have a background in dance. Maybe you could explain what I meant, or what we were talking about getting dancers on their original tracks.
Right. Well, it's the same thing. It's an old adage, which is kind of true. Like, if you don't know what the hell you're doing, you might as well teach at a university. That kind of thing. So just because you were a fabulous dancer doesn't mean you're good at anything else, like teaching or running a company or, I'm sorry. It doesn't guarantee that. Depends on your interests and your education. But the thing is that Nancy and I have become, over decades, I was going to say a number of years, but now I just say decades, to have a sort of mind inseparability, which doesn't mean that we're all the Borg. It means that we have different skills and different specialties, names, dates, titles, I don't know. We have different skills. She has many of them and I only have a couple. So since we're very, very much working together all the time for a long time, I trust her to even sometimes give notes or something for me, or certainly to take care of all the shit that I don't know anything about. But she's in the audience more than I am. She's meeting people more than I am. She's, of course, doing way more than one can imagine. I can't imagine, because I do a very specialized thing, and she is much more versatile and varied. That's a compliment. It's not multitasking at the expense of everything turning to shit. It's like really solving problems that I have sometimes created through my artistry. Is that all right? Did I dig that deep enough? Okay. I see there's evidence of the what?
I didn't take out the broom.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. I'm noticing I'm happy to see there's some evidence of knee surgery in the crowd, I've noticed. Not just you. Okay. That's good.
Okay, so we're rapidly moving ahead to 1988, and we're about to move to Brussels. Nancy, could you say something about you've been with the company for 2 years, and now you have the opportunity to move abroad. And trepidation, excitement?
Yes. That was a Mark answer, sorry.
That was good. It was a very long time ago, right? It's really a long, long time ago. And it was very important, but it's like 30 years now or something.
Yeah, it was a very challenging time. I think we were all really excited at the possibility of what was being offered. We were a mid-sized company, we didn't have a home, and they were providing what to us seemed like unlimited production budgets, the opportunity to work with an orchestra, perform in any venues, 13 months pay. It took us a while to figure out what that meant. I had a secretary. There were no computers, so it was the early. I had a secretary who spoke 7 languages, but we were given all of the things that money could buy that we didn't have here in the States, and so that was incredibly exciting, and what the potential would be for what Mark would be able to create. Like I said, it was a really long time ago, and it was a really, really hard place to live and work for many, many reasons. That aren't that interesting anymore, maybe.
No, look it up. Read the book. It tells you all
chapter,
the awful bits.
But the reason because where was the company based while you were in
We were
Brussels?
based in Brussels. We were in residence at the Théâtre Royal de la Monnaie.
So the National Dance Company of Belgium.
We, at the Opera House, basically replaced, what's his name, the Béjart Ballet du XXe siècle, who were there for a siècle before we replaced him.
But you write about in your book, and even at the time of the Mark Morris Dance Center opening, that a pivotal thing to come out of being in Brussels, besides the fantastic work that you made while you were there, was the commitment to having a space of your own. So come back to the States in 91, building opens 10 years later.
Well, part of it was, part of our engagement in Brussels was we had these giant studios that were called mudra, after gesture language of classical Indian dance that was Béjart's studio. So we had a raked studio because the Opera House was raked, slanted, stood to dance on a horrible hill, which we don't do much anymore. And the scene shop was there for the whole opera, and we had a canteen. And, it was a real plant. And we knew that we needed a physical plant for us, because why not? It's an actual job, not just a hit and run sort of hobby. And so this was, it was kind of rickety and weird and great. It was our place, and then as soon as we left, it burnt to the ground somehow. Oh my goodness. Oh. Like this. I had nothing to do with it.
So maybe you could say why Brooklyn, because when you're opening or starting to investigate, Brooklyn was not what Brooklyn is now.
I was born in Brooklyn.
Yep.
Manhattan was not really affordable at the time. When we came back, we had a very clear goal to find a home. I mean, we wanted to recreate all of the really positive things about our time in Brussels, and that was the most positive one. It took us 10 years, but we actually almost went into a joint project with Annie Leibovitz in Manhattan, buying a building there. But it was Harvey Lichtenstein who asked, I think after decades of failing to get Twyla to Brooklyn, thought, well, maybe I'll get Mark Morris here. I'm not sure. But called me and asked if we would consider Brooklyn. I said, absolutely. He connected me with somebody, Bruce Ratner, who was their board chair at the time, was also a developer in downtown Brooklyn. He gave me someone on his staff with a big book, and we walked around all of downtown Brooklyn, and I said, what about that boarded up building? And he'd look it up and where it was. And the site that we're on was actually our second choice, but it was it had been derelict and boarded up for 10 years. And I think its last use was a New York State mental health outpatient clinic. It had been built as a bank. It had been a car showroom, and the building was from 1841. And that's where we built the Mark Morris Dance Center.
So one of the things I was struck by in looking at the company's mission on your website, which is fabulous, we'll talk about that in a minute, is not only the kind of more expected mission, which is supporting your artistic output of dance, music, opera production, but also to serve as a cultural resource to engage and enrich the community. And I wonder if you could, Mark, when you were imagining a building and you were imagining it as a home for you and the dancers, was that always part of your plan to have the building become such a resource for the community as well? Or is that something that evolved as you became at home in Brooklyn and through the collaboration with other folks around?
The latter. First of all, a couple things to set that up. All historical. One is a famous quote that I think is correct, but I'm not sure. Lar Lubavitch, good friend of mine, choreographer. I danced with his company long, long ago when I was first choreographing, probably on the sidelines of his rehearsal, driving him crazy. He said to me, and I was putting on some shows, and we're good friends to this day. He said, "You're not going to start a company, are you?" I did. So anyway, I started a company so I could make up dances and watch them. So first, I shoplifted people from other companies I was working with, or class, or the restaurant. It was really a group of friends and blah, 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 like that. And it was true. So it was people I worked with who were already marvelous dancers. I put on these shows as the Mark Morris Dance Group. We're now the Mark Morris Dance Group and Musical Ensemble. But also it was just, another bit of advice I got was from the fabulous Jerome Robbins, who said, you're not doing a piece for the Paris Opera Ballet, are you? And then I did. So I'm not good at following that kind of advice. I do the opposite. So what I wanted was corny but true, homespun. I wanted a dancing school, kind of like what I went to, Verla Flowers Dance Arts in Seattle. Just a neighborhood dancing school with adorable children taking tap. Tap, tumbling, and ballet was all in 1 hour. If you were 6, that's great. I didn't go to a conservatory, whatever. I've taught all over the place. But I wanted a friendly kind of dance studio. And then, of course, it turned into, we were approached and began participating and collaborating with people like the Dance for PD program that we have, but also just like, not like a ballet school, not a dance school that creates dancers to go into my company, although, that has yet to happen, but it's also, I wanted the company and what we do and them comfortable and at home in a real workplace where you go every day and don't have to be out when the elevator shuts down at a rental space, which is normal. So it just got bigger and better and, more complicated and more expensive and COVID and et cetera. I'm trying to lead to today, but it's not going very well. So I didn't imagine the magnitude of the place we have or the number of people going there and who rents it and who, it's amazing. It's blossomed in an incredible way.
So Nancy, a couple of years ago, David Leventhal and John Higginbotham were here talking about the documentary film about the Dance with Parkinson's program. And you can watch that interview in the archives and see the fantastic documentary. But in that conversation with David and John Higginbotham, both former dancers with the company, they attribute the placement of Dance with PD to you, that somebody called you up. Do you have a memory of that?
Sure. There was an announcement in the New York Times of the opening of the Mark Morris Dance Center that very few people read, but probably thousands of people have that newspaper still at home because it was on September 12th in the Metro section of the New York Times. And there was a woman, Oli Westheimer, who actually read that article and called us up basically saying that she ran a support group for people with Parkinson's, and they met monthly at the Brooklyn Public Library, and she thought it'd be a really good idea if we had a dancer come and work with them. And I said, well, we have a really great new studio. Why don't you guys come here? And it was from that conversation that we basically started the program. And David and John were obviously instrumental in its growth and developing the methodology of the teaching and the training program. And it's now in, don't quote me on this, I think it's 355 communities in 42 countries or something like crazy like that. Or 42 states and 7 countries, or we have a fact checker over there. We'll have the details in just a moment.
This place is lousy with fact checkers, I'll tell you that.
So
it's close.
I can feel your sort of why is more torturing me with the past, and I'm thinking a little bit about reconstructions of dances and versus making a new dance.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about you doing a reconstruction of Gloria in 2005 that you were sort of like, we've done this dance a lot. And you say in this book that it was Nancy's idea that you conduct. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I want to talk about the reconstruction of Mevlevi Dervish first.
Okay.
The dance, called Mevlevi Dervish, because it's based on the spinnings of the Sufis who spin, Mevlevi, the particular sect, the dancing which is spinning without spotting, because spotting hadn't been invented because it wasn't necessary, because there weren't proscenia yet. So you're dancing surrounded, and the spinning is a spiritual action. And I had, because it's so much later than anyone knows, I was asked to spin because I worked with Laura Dean for a long time, who was her work is kind of lost right now, which is too bad because it was very great. And so, her work was spinning. So you'd spin for 20 minutes at a time and traveling in a circle, and it was great because it also, you find it and you've got it. So I was given a silent film of that dance. Imagine a silent film, black and white, like I'm making up the sound because it was silent, but in my head it was like, and if you blink your eyes really fast, that's what it looks like. So it was this dance, like, and then I had a tape of the music, which was Jess Meeker's music, wonderful pianist composer who I knew.
And dancer was?
Huh? Wasn't it Barton?
No, you were watching Ted Shawn in the
I was
video.
watching Ted Shawn. Oh, yeah, okay, it was Ted Shawn, whatever. I don't know, it was black and white, I couldn't tell. I thought it was Barton. Weather Vane Barton. Anyway, so I learned it from the tape. I couldn't tell who the hell it was. Have you seen that? It's like, okay. Yeah. So anyway, I spent a long time, for me, watching the silent film and listening to the cassette, of Jess playing the music. And I put them together, and I did a very good job. And then I came in to work with Barton, who just sort of went like, he made it up. It wasn't a reconstruction. He made it up new, and I learned it because I didn't want to fight with him, and I loved him. But what I was doing that's on some recording here, it's close, but he changed every single thing. It's true. I had done it. It's this heavy felt costume and a fez. It's beautiful. Watch it if you can. And anyway, so that was my relationship with Barton, and hooray. But it was a little bit, what's the word when you get something a little bit wrong? I can't think of what it is. A paraphrase. But it was legit because it came from him.
So are you saying your conducting was a little bit of a paraphrase? I'm trying to bring it back to
Oh, you
Gloria
are?
now.
Okay. I was doing reconstructions. Nancy wanted me to conduct because I wasn't interested in watching that dance so much because it's a favorite, which, it's like Mr. Taylor's Esplanade, where you gotta watch it, and it was really good, and it changes over time. You know what I'm saying?
Nancy, I've been thinking about this because I think something that I think is that artists are always interested in the next project, and like this one is done and let's go on, and you trying to balance that and keep the favorites, the masterpieces, to keep Mark's interest in them. Could you talk about so it seems like the conducting is.
I'm still here, Mara.
Are you?
It was our 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
Okay, it was our 25th anniversary. We were doing multiple weeks, multiple programs, and Gloria had to happen. And Mark didn't want it to happen, so I needed to find a way that he would want it to have happen. So
I didn't want to sit and watch it.
So I gave him a job.
Facing the other direction.
I mean,
From dancing, yeah. So then I learned how. Right. Okay.
And a beautiful piece of music to challenge yourself with.
No.
So
I knew the music, and I'd been running my own band for years. So whoever was conducting, or music director Colin, or Ethan, or Linda Dowdell in the early days, it was always me. So I don't play an instrument, but I'm an expert at everything, So aren't you a scholar in Come on, Mara, where's every song important in residence? Anyway, I'm a choreographer in residence, at least for this afternoon. And so it's like, I love those dances, but it's not just that I must make up something new. And it's also a piece that I'd sung in high school. It's a piece that I directed and, always for years. And so the step, which was scary and challenging, to actually give a downbeat to a band. That's the thing. I was perfectly confident in every other way, but I was scared shitless to fuck it up. And so I studied with Craig Smith and with Jane Glover, and I was working with conductors and musicians. I practiced a lot. And at first I was just happy we finished at the same time. And then I got more confidence, and so I was doing Dido and Aeneas and other pieces, but it's not my other job.
Could you say something about your long relationship with Tanglewood, the first dance company to have been in residence there and working closely with musicians there in addition to working with the dancers, and how that opens some. I feel like when I saw performances of the company there, that you had more musical choices you could make because you weren't having to supply all the musicians yourself, that there were brilliant young musicians there.
It was our arrangement. Nancy will do more of this than I did, but it was a wonderful opportunity because it's a dance. It's a music joint, and it's been there forever. And we were asked to go there because of my relationship with music. Music is very, very interesting to me, and dance is very interesting to me. So I'm always music motivated, initiated, and that's why when the theater was not as commodious as it is now, we would take out some chairs, and that cost money, and we put in a fiddle and a violin and whatever. So we were establishing using live music here a lot. When I did Mevlevi Dervish, the piano was Jess Meeker's own piano. It was off stage in the wings, and we did it with live music. So anyway, when we started with Tanglewood years ago, we would go and work with the fellows, and the dancers would work with them on the dances of the music they were going to play, and the dancers would in turn learn how to play something or sing something. So it was a fabulous, exchange. And I did pieces I could never do anywhere, meaning they had 1,000 harpists. So you could do that one piece that was written for 1,000 harps. So that was a wonderful boon. And then we started exchanging a little bit, bringing musicians from Tanglewood when we performed here. So it was a wonderful sort of relationship.
Nancy, do you remember the conversation of hey, does Mark want to come be in residence here at Tanglewood?
No, because that's not how it happened, but...
I just showed up can we be here for a month? It didn't work that way, sadly.
I think the idea of the collaboration was about working with the fellows, and it was less about the performance. And so our relationship started with Ellen Heistein, with the fellows, not so much with the presenting arm of Tanglewood, which was under somebody else. So really what we had pitched to them was this exchange of of having this opportunity for musicians to actually put the movement put the music into their body, so they understood the movement, which changed the way that they played. And that came from our first experience with Yo-Yo Ma when we did Falling Downstairs, because he understood tempi differently after working with dancers. And so we built on that idea and really working with the fellows and having them actually get up and learn the steps or learn, to balance on one foot, then they actually really understood for the first time that dancers do know when musicians are slowing down. So it was built on that sort of exchange, and the performances came later. So.
But I also staged some operas there, and I coached string quartets and opera workshops, scene work. It was so wonderful and fun. And a sidebar to that is that for a long time now, with Colin as my music director, we've been doing once a week with the dancers. We do sight singing, music theory. The group of us sits down and sings scales, and everybody thinks they sound horrible and are embarrassed, and it's so thrilling. There's nothing like group singing. So that's what we do, and it helps everybody.
I just want to say that Mark was actually on faculty at Tanglewood before we started working there. That's how the conversation started.
So before we go to the future,
God.
We're at this book. We're at the book.
I'm in the present right now. I'm only in the present.
Okay, we missed the opportunity in the summer of 2020 to have a conversation about the book and book signing, and you can get this book. It's no longer available in the Pillow store because it's gone. You can get it on the
sold out.
Sold out. You can get it on the Mark Morris Dance Group website, both hardcover or paperback, or at your local independent bookseller. Could you just say a little bit about for somebody who's thinking about the future and the next project, you go back in time to this. We hear some stories from your childhood through Pepperland, pretty much. And what made you have the kind of patience to sit down and think about the past?
I was asked. I met a gentleman who's a singer, performer, songwriter of renown, who goes by the performing name of John Wesley Harding, and he's also a fabulous writer, fiction writer, wonderful novelist, still performs under his real name, which is Wesley Stace. So Wes Stace and we met at a function, blah, 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 fancy function. We'd never met. We fell right into conversation. I read his books. He had heard of me and liked my stories, if you can imagine. He's also very long-winded and interruptive, like I am. So it was a fight and so fun. And so we did over a year or so interviews with him that he would then transcribe, because he didn't want to ghostwrite anything and I didn't want to work with anybody. So we were made for each other. And so hours and hours of interview that he recorded and then transcribed himself, and then we would re-edit together and he's an English fellow. He's from Great Britain. And so he would say, like, my mum. It's like, I'm sorry, that was not my mom. That was Maxine, so let's get that together. So anyway, it's in my voice with his better judgment, but also just the assembling of it, the order of it, the editing. It was all collaborative in a wonderful way. I'm very, very happy with the book.
Nancy, yeah.
Read it. It's even better when you read it. Yeah.
Nancy, at what point did you come in and sort of say, this actually didn't happen this way, or anything like that? Where was your voice in this? Speaking of expert fact checkers.
I'm lying? Let me start the sentence. Honestly, I was really, to tell the truth.
I supplied Wes with a lot of background information and a number of people to interview and a number of documents and such from the archive. And so we started out separate from his conversations with Mark. I think every chapter that was written, every draft came my way. There were a number of things that I did say, well, just so you know, this and this are being conflated, and which is fine because this is a memoir, right? This isn't a factual book. So if this is how you remember it, that's what's important. But just so you know, that's not actually how they happen. Those kinds of things,
But that's why it's a memoir as opposed to a documentary or something like that. It's like, I remember this. Like, no, you don't. But that's the story.
Okay, I just got to ask you about the handwritten letter to the Pacific Northwest Ballet when you were applying for a choreography fellowship in 1978.
Yeah.
Could you tell that story of writing that letter and how you found that to put in this book?
I'm not sure. I'd have to read the book to know. No, I said it. It was a long time ago. It was years ago. It had to do with, I wrote to Pacific Northwest Ballet that was then run by.
Can't stand it. And,
Go ahead. Oh, you have it there.
Yeah.
Well, what am I talking for?
well, maybe you just read this last sentence.
No, you can if you want. I already wrote it. No. It was.
The last sentence is, I wish I had a typewriter.
I wish I had a typewriter. Oh, they hadn't been invented yet. Here's the thing. I applied to make up a dancer because I was making up dances. I also, I don't know if that's in there, probably. I also was on the Seattle Arts Council when Pacific Northwest Ballet applied for a grant to do a really, to me, still to this day, a very bad idea for a project where you have 4 choreographers. Each one choreographs one of the seasons of the way too frequent and ubiquitous and terribly arranged lately 4 seasons of Antonio Vivaldi. Here, what are they? Help me. Summer, fall, winter, I can't remember. So anyway, they applied, and I was in this room looking over grants that said proposed choreographers, Mark Morris, I don't know what season I was, but I said, excuse me, I have a little problem with this. They're applying for this grant. They never asked me. I say, no. I don't know if they got it, but I sure didn't do it. So that's my story about that. It's like, wait a minute, watch who you're applying for a grant, based on their participation. It wasn't me.
Are you
That's
talking
great.
about the letter when they didn't pay him?
Oh,
With the
no,
live
I was just
music,
talking
you're
about the
doing the other
application.
letter.
Where
Okay.
you
That's
would tell
different.
that story.
No. I'm
Well, I'm going
haven't
to
read
say
the book.
Now, can
I'm
we get
gonna-
more now?
Yeah, I'm
That's
gonna
so
say,
historical.
Leave that for the book. Okay, so
You have to. I was also like 22 or something.
okay, most
I
recent.
won.
You won. Most recent past, not most recent past, but I do want to just ask if you could talk a little bit about conversations that you had with Burt Bacharach about Look of Love and how those conversations started.
Well, it took us a really long time to get someone to get us to get beyond, get past Bert's people. And Bert has a lot of people. There are 5 different publishers. There's a couple of folks that are working to exploit his music. There's his wife. There's his kids. There's his manager, and a number of people in the music business. But we finally found our way in, and actually got to meet directly with Bert on Zoom.
Has anyone ever been on a Zoom meeting of any kind? Okay, good. Enough said.
Time difference, challenge. He's not an early riser.
I'm not either, but he was 3 hours away earlier. Yeah.
Exactly.
It was a bunch of people I'd met on Zoom, and we'd been communicating with them, of course. So our first tile was like, I don't know, 24?
12.
Whatever, I don't know. I don't know. I can't do this. I don't want to talk about Zoom. But I will say that we were all there, all excited, and Ethan is like sobbing in anticipation of meeting him. And it's like, Bert, come on. So he shows up in his square and greeted us, and we're so thrilled. And I'm going to say this because it's true. He was eating breakfast sometimes, and sometimes, not all of us were born yesterday, and you know how sometimes you get on Zoom and you just see the top of somebody's head? I was doing that, but then I caught it. Or you're muted, all that bullshit that is so impossible. So I talked a lot to his forehead the first meeting, and then Ethan was going to ask these, it's like, oh God, Mr. Bacharach, call me Bert. It was like that. It was so fabulous, and he gave us permission without us even asking. He said, well, you don't, how are you going to do this? You're going to have a flugelhorn. It's like, well, we'll have a trumpet, or it's like, what about that song? I was like, okay. He said, you don't want it to be boring. You don't want it to be a jukebox musical. God, save us from those. And why don't you use different vocal things, arrangements, different people, different tempi, do a medley. You don't want it to be boring. It's like, thank goddess. That's all I live for, is for non-boringness. I'm kind of in the wrong career, but I do what I can. So anyway, and he asked about a song that, you should tell that one.
Yeah, Ethan was asking Bert about trying to figure out how much flexibility and how much range he could, and how far he can drift from the way the things were written. And one of the things he was talking about was Say a Little Prayer. And he was saying, I've been working with Marcy, who's the singer in our show, and really trying to stick to the Dionne Warwick recording.
Wait a second. What was the song?
Say a Little Prayer.
Get that in your head, everybody. Or try and get it out. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
So Ethan is explaining that he's really following that recording, and Bert picks up from his yogurt and says and tells us how he was never really happy with the way Dionne sang it. The tempi weren't quite right, but she really loved it, so they went ahead, they recorded it. It didn't do that well. It only made it to the top 9. And he then said, but when Aretha did it, and he started singing, and the 12 of us, well, the 11 of us are just stunned. We're like gobsmacked listening to Bert sing to us. And then, of course, we're all texting each other. Did anybody push record? Did anybody take a screenshot? Did anybody? No, nobody.
Delete.
Yeah. But yeah, so we had some great conversations with him.
But the music is very, very meticulously and strictly notated rhythmically. It's really difficult music. If you sing along, good luck.
I think one of the reasons why Bert was really excited about Mark taking on this project was because almost immediately Mark acknowledged how complex the music is. And I think a lot of people have just assumed that it's not, right? It's just this pop stuff. And it was that immediate sort of connection about the rhythms and the structure of the work that they connected on.
I'm going to open it up for some questions or comments from you all, and one of the 3 of us will repeat them so everybody can hear.
There's one now.
Okay. Yes, please.
My name is Susan White, and it's a great joy to be here. It's been probably 30 years since I've seen Mark, and I might cry, and 20 since I last saw Nancy in New York. I worked at Dance Umbrella in Boston with Jeremy Allinger for 4 years when we presented Mark and Nancy with Barry and the amazing company that worked with you there. So I just wanted to share that I learned yesterday you were here to do this Pillow Talk, and I'm here because it brings me so much joy to see you both. And I have the first book that was written about you, Mark Moore, by Jean Ariel, and if you haven't read it, it's at 62, one of the books that's come with me on every life shift. And I say that because every time I've read it, every time, which it's readable again and again, it brings me to the core of what I've always felt you've invited us into. And I want to say that for me, teamwork is the fact that Nancy, Mark wouldn't be here today without you. And Mark, Nancy wouldn't be here without you. And that the details really don't matter to me. That's living. And living is that I have this chance to see you both. Living is the fact that when I think about what I've learned from you, Mark, and your work, and I just sat down today, and when I was thinking about seeing you in that anticipation, it just came to me that what I've learned from you and from L'Allegro and all the other dances you've created and the ones that you continue to do is that it takes, to get to the simplicity of beauty, you have to go through a lot of difficulties, and you do that. And that's an amazing, amazing gift that you've shared with so many of us out here who you see, you don't see, and I'm profoundly grateful. I haven't read this book yet. I will. It will come with me. I have a sensitivity to what goes on behind the scenes, and I send and present to you so much love and gratitude. Thank you.
I think we will not try to summarize that beautiful statement, to just say the simplicity of beauty and what you go through to get there. Another question or comment?
Welcome home, Mark, to the Berkshires. I don't want to sound like this is your life, but I was with you at Chamberlain in the Days in the Arts program with the little kids from the Boston Symphony Orchestra. One of the generous things that you did was open up Ozawa Hall with your dancers and your musicians and let the kids dance. And while all the other instructors, like myself, were saying, we're going to, sit in the back and read the paper, have cigarettes, I said, no, I'm going to try this. So I jumped, I rolled, I flipped, I saw all the gestures you could do, and it was amazing. But, these kids probably now, this was back in the 90s, are probably in their 20s and 30s, maybe some are dancers. But your generosity of that program in Tanglewood, I just wanted to thank you. So it was a beautiful moment seeing a lot of the moves that I had seen from your dancers, from the eyes of little kids, being put forward in the sensibility of like 1968. So thank Isaac for the costumes that brought me back to that year. Good job.
Thank you. Well, I'm freaking out.
Okay, well, I'll vamp for a second and
Okay.
say "Welcome Home to the Berkshires" was what was the summary from that. And
Are you all right after the rolling around? Are you okay?
I took about 5 Advils and I got my shirt.
Okay, all right, just checking.
Yeah, sir. So this is in response to some feedback that you had been given. Don't start. You're not going to start a company, are you? From Lar Lubavitch, and then realizing
I
that
see you're recapitulating.
I am.
Oh, okay, that's good.
because maybe some folks in there did not hear. And then an example of John Higginbotham, longtime dancer of your company, now artistic director of his own company. And please pull out your crystal ball and tell us about what do you think is coming for the modern dance world?
No clue. I have no idea. I really don't. I never saw any of this coming. I'm not just talking about COVID, which ain't over, but there's never been a gigantic demand for modern dance or whatever we're calling it. It's never been the lodestar of the arts in America. That has never happened. There have been glimpses. The dance boom of the 70s, I was there. I didn't hear a big boom. There was more of it and more bad and more good, and I don't even know. And some of it's gonna, I don't know. I mean, I'm not anti-dance in any way, and I have a particular taste. I'm less likely to go to a show that doesn't have live music if I know the music and it's not composed specifically for. It's like I don't need to see another, Nutcracker. If the orchestra isn't very good, it's like I know how it turns out. So, but I'm for Dancing with the Stars. I'm for TikTok. I'm for all of the media in which I have no participation. I'm all for people dancing because they like to, and it doesn't have to be something you don't understand. It doesn't have to be contextualized or apologized for or made relevant or made a healing art, because I don't see the arts as the answer to everyone's happiness and mindfulness. I just don't. That's not our responsibility. I'm not religious. I'm not a spiritual fellow, but I fall for things, specifically music, and a lot of music came from cultures that I disagree with, like the fucking Roman Catholic Church. Sorry about the fucking part, but and I appreciate and I like it, and I'm a real culture vampire. If that's culture appropriation, I'm sorry, but I feel like I've been living in the world for a long time, and I love that. So as far as what's coming up, I hope it's really, really good, but it's something I can't imagine what it is because it doesn't exist yet.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I can't resist. I'm sorry. But I think there's no shortage of talent in this country, in this world. I think there's a real shortage of support for the arts, particularly in this culture that we call this country. And so that's a real challenge. I think the business model that we operate within, which is the 501c3, depending on a balance of earned revenue or a combination of earned revenue and contributed revenue, no longer works. It's not sustainable. I don't know what the future is. I hope that there's some really bright young kids that are interested in arts administration that want to try to figure out what that next model is. But
Replace us.
This is not the way to support artists. This is not the way to allow them to create and promote and present their work. It's a struggle. It's harder than ever before. It's not going to get any easier in the foreseeable future. And so I'm hoping there are some really great minds out there thinking about what that new model might be. And I don't know, maybe we go back to the individual patronage. So if anybody wins the $400 million Mega Millions, maybe you want to support a couple of artists. But yeah.
I want to say one more thing, which is to tie in two people I know very well who are choreographers living and working today, Pam Tanowitz and John Higginbotham. Sorry, I have a nickname for him. Has the word bathroom in it. Okay, I'm sorry. He knows that it's not a surprise. John Higginbotham, danced with me for a long time, helped start the PD program, the Dance for PD, and is a choreographer and director, and he has a company that doesn't have a lot of work. I mean, we're coming back, and it's great, but it's still not a lot. It hasn't felt. You can't add a show to a season that was booked 2 years ago. You just can't do it. Who's going to show up? So anyway, Pam also has a company, and they're very shoestring, and they're very good artists, and they get seen because of certain producers who present them and residencies and stuff. But it's a real difficult patch together life, and most dancers dance with multiple choreographers who don't have full-on, full-time seasons or salaries or anything. It's really, really rough for dancers. And I agree, there's no shortage of fabulous, gifted, wonderful dancers, but there's not a lot of work.
I mean, I'm glad that you said that last thing, because I look at your gorgeous dancers, and they're not the same dancers you started dancing with in 1980.
There might be some of the 80s around if you want them to try and stand up.
But I mean, I feel like that's the it's not an inexhaustible resource, but there are people all over, those, as you were saying, the people who maybe were introduced to it by you inviting them onto the stage at Tanglewood when they were 8 years old or something, and that energy keeps contributing. But right, who else is contributing?
But that's also what our hugely successful, fabulous, what Peter Sellers, my good friend, the director, refers to as the International Center for Mark Morris Related Studies in downtown Brooklyn. We just call it Mark Morris, which is a little weird if you're the building and Grant's tomb at the same time. So, it's a big, wonderful, lively place with some older people and some very younger people and a whole bunch in between, and everybody's crashing, and it's fabulous. And that's what I wanted, was a lively sort of school that has music and dancing and people. And we've got that. That's not the same as graduating a university dance program and getting a job. They're very different, yeah.
So I'm going to leave that as our final public comment,
Okay.
And say, come see the show here if you're lucky enough to have tickets. See the company make their Joyce premiere in August. Buy the book. Go see something at the Dance Center in Brooklyn. And please come back soon and often.
She has to ask a question. She's been there for a long time. Go.
Great, thank you. So, first of all, thank you. I'm remembering the last time I saw you, you were sitting on the edge of the stage here with colored socks. And I'm holding that and now. And I'm connecting that to the music of then,
Yeah.
my childhood,
Oh.
and now, and hearing that, and both times coexisting. And I was told to see this performance by a friend of mine last night, who said she was uncontrollably crying. And as I sat today,
Yeah.
I was uncontrollably, cathartically crying, which speaks to the mystery, the depth, the beauty, and the music.
Yeah.
And
It worked.
it did work. To me, it's the essence of art. So it's more of a statement for thank you for allowing myself and me to feel, and us.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the question?
Here's the answer.
Go.
Thank you for coming here and buying a ticket and watching our show. Otherwise, we don't exist. So thank you very, very much. Thank you.